The Florida Gators return home for homecoming and thrash the Vanderbilt Commodores 38-14. We'll talk about that and what lies ahead for the Gators up next on the In All Kinds of Weather forecast. And hello again, Gator Nation. Welcome back to the In All Kinds of Weather forecast. I am stepping in as the host today, Neil Schulman. Chris Yanes, our usual host, has a very good reason for not being here today. He is off running the Chicago Marathon, once in a lifetime opportunity for him. So obviously he's got to go do that. He didn't really miss much of a game yesterday either. I think it's fair to say that the Gators definitely had the better of the play against the Vanderbilt Commodores. Maybe a slight moment of a little bit of nervousness when Vanderbilt hit the big play to tie the game at 7-7 early. But for most of the game, you could say the Gators dominated the play. Not really much competition that we saw on the field between the two teams. So, Dustin, let's just get right into it. What were some of the things that you liked from the Gators in their 38-14 win over Vandy?
Well, this was the first time that the Gators threw for about 30 passing attempts, over 200 passing yards, and actually won the game. So that was definitely a plus. That was the big thing that I wanted to see all season, that we would have more creativity in the passing department, that we get the ball down the field. Now, one talking point that you and I have talked about off the air is that I really want to see us hit those deep balls. So we're throwing it down the field now, but now we got to connect on them, because if we're going to have any prayer at making it a game with Georgia, if we're going to have any prayer at making a game with LSU, we have to hit those deep balls. So that's kind of the next step. Now, there's still some issues that you and I are seeing with the design in the pass game. There's still issues that we're seeing in terms of the play calling, but I'm definitely seeing a step in the right direction. The big thing that I want to point out, and I look forward to your thoughts in the matter as well, Neil, but I'm real happy with what we saw out of Arliss Boardingham. He's an amazing athlete. He came in playing both ways, both wide receiver and linebacker, but really he came in being recruited as a tight end, and he's definitely shown why Billy Napier wanted to go after him. He was certainly a high risk, high reward player, and we're seeing that risk play off. He's definitely filling out those shoes. The cool thing is, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Kyle Pitts was in the building, so it's great to see that performance in front of Kyle Pitts. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and
Trask
call.
was. Pitts has an NFL game this weekend. Kyle Trask was in the building.
Kyle Trask.
Yes.
I thought I saw Pitts, but it may have been somebody else. But Kyle Trask was definitely in the building, and we all saw what Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts were able to do with the Kyle to Kyle. But I appreciate that correction there, Neil. So, yeah, what do you think, man?
I mean, for me, it was great to see the younger guys step up into bigger roles. Obviously, Boardingham is going to count for that. Arliss Boardingham actually on the day, 1 yard shy of triple figures through the air, 7 catches for 99 yards. Did drop a pass, but he more than made up for that. When you catch 99 yards worth of passes and 2 touchdowns, no one's really going to complain too much about the drop. So overall, just obviously a in the black type of day, a net positive for sure for him. Eugene Wilson comes back, touches the ball 8 times, 64 yards. Love to see that. Got him involved in the offense early and often, and he was always someone that I think Vanderbilt had to keep their eyes out for on every given play. So love that. Montrell Johnson as the RB1 yesterday had a lot to do on the ground. He rushed the ball 18 times, 135 yards and a touchdown. Treyon Webb got 70 yards on the ground. Only 4 carries, says the box score, but 70 yards is nothing to sneeze at. Thought he almost broke one for a touchdown. He got tracked down just at the last second by the pursuing defender. So obviously a great day for him. And I like what I saw from Mertz. I mean, he is what he is. You know, the numbers are what they are. They're never going to be fantastic. I think 30 for 36 for 254 yards is as good as it's going to get. And it's not that those numbers are bad for sure, but it's just, as you said, and as I've said in previous shows, the lack of a downfield passing game. It is what it is. We just have to make peace with it. We don't have it. We're not going to have it this season with this current offense, with the current personnel, both in terms of quarterback and in terms of coaching and play calling. As simple it gets, we're not going to find it this year. So with that being said, I thought he did fine. I mean, he didn't turn the ball over, which is, again, that's the most important thing I look for, even more important than whether or not you hit the deep ball. And I thought he did a good job of for the most part, taking the open receivers where they were. I thought there were a couple of times where, for example, Khalil Jackson once on a hitch and go. We talked about that on the last pod. He had that. He did a hitch and he put his foot in the ground and he took off down the sideline on a go route. And he was open. Mertz just didn't throw the ball to him. I don't know if that's a confidence issue with him, or if the play just wasn't designed to go there, or if he didn't see him, or if he couldn't really reliably throw the ball to him. At least he thought. I don't know what the issue was, but he had separation and he was open. And that's just another example of what Florida is going to be limited with this season. But I mean, those are some of the positives for me. Obviously, it was not a perfect game by any means, Dustin. So, I mean, the Gators are out of cupcakes now. We're done with our soft spots. We're done with our soft landing spots on the schedule. We have nothing but legitimate opponents left on the schedule. So with that in mind, because it was not a perfect game, what did you see against Vandy that had you a little concerned or worried about the upcoming stretch the Gators have?
Yeah, there's a few things. I know you're right. I mean, there is a scenario where Florida does not win a game the rest of the season, and that's challenging. I mean, another losing season would be devastating for the Gator Nation. But we're optimistic. There is some games in the schedule that Florida can beat. There's teams that are beatable. There's teams that Florida is more talented, and there's other teams that Florida is significantly more talented. That Florida, just based on who they have on the field, their guys are better than the opponents. So Florida has a very real possibility of being successful. But two teaching points that I want to bring up. Number one for Mertz specifically, and y'all know I'm a quarterback guy. Y'all know that I'm always, whenever I'm watching the game, I'm always looking at the quarterback technique, and two things from Mertz that he knows that he has to get better at. And these are things that at least one of them, Billy Napier, mentioned during the press conference, and the press actually followed up with Mertz on, and he discussed it too. And that is, of course, holding on to the ball. He cannot do that with the rest of the schedule. He will get absolutely murdered if he does that against Georgia. He will get absolutely murdered if he does that against Florida
You
State and
mean for
against
too
pretty
long?
much
And
any
just
team.
clarifying, you're talking about holding on to the ball for too long.
Holding on to the ball for too long.
Yes, okay.
They're in the pocket. There needs to be an internal clock in his mind. It needs to be 1, 2, 3, go. That's what I did when I was playing quarterback in high school. There was always a countdown clock in my mind. I get the ball and I would have 1, 2, 3 out. Okay, right on that. At 3, if the ball wasn't out, then I'd have to be out. I have to get out. Another thing is I really want to see Mertz practice moving up in the pocket. So often he hurts himself in terms of finding the right passing lane to throw by getting outside of the pocket. And we've seen the stat over and over again. Mertz is really successful when it comes to running when he runs to his right. But when he happens to have to move to his left, he's very uncomfortable. And he generally just keeps the ball, runs out of bounds, doesn't get the ball out of his hands. Well, that's not good. Mertz needs to practice getting the ball, getting his body up the field. There's the pocket is not designed to be perfect. Even the best offensive line in the country, there's always an opportunity for guys to come around that. What the pocket is designed to do is it's designed to give the quarterback just enough time so the ball can get down the field where it's supposed to go. And so if he's able to climb that pocket, then I think he's going to be a lot more successful in not only getting the ball to the right guy, but also being able to push the ball down the field. Because, again, let me just say this: while we're not 100% happy with the play design and the passing scheme for the Gators and what Billy Napier has put together on offense, it's serviceable. There is guys open down the field. The challenge is Mertz has already taken that player. He's already taken that player out of the play, right? I mean, how many times did we see Khalil Jackson wide open running a streak down the field on the other side of the field that Mertz was running? The solution in my mind is Mertz has to keep his eyes down the field. He has to climb the pocket because then we'll see a more productive uh, passing game. Because yes, he's efficient. He's accurate. He throws a catchable ball. 30 for 30, 30 for 36 is excellent. But imagine if he was 30 for 36 and not only was he throwing the easiest ball, but he was throwing the most optimal ball for that situation.
Because I mean, just on top of that, how many times did Mertz hit the check down route when there was a receiver open between 5 to 15 yards down the field? Not even talking home run balls, not even talking the deep shot. Forget home runs, just hit doubles, just hit them in the gap. I want to use baseball analogy because that's my second favorite sport. Just hit one clean into the gap. Just rocket one between the shortstop and third baseman. Clean single. You don't need these little bunts, these little Texas League bloopers that just drop just beyond the outstretched arms of the infielders as they're running backwards. Take some, put some the fat part of your bat on the ball and get some clean hits. And that's, in football terms, the translation there is the 5 to 15 yards down the field, the intermediate routes, which he had several times throughout the course of the game. Now, not on every single play. There were some plays that seemed to be designed to be those screen passes, those flares, those little slants that are maybe 3 or 4 yards past the line of scrimmage. But there were plays where he had receivers with separation between 5 and 15 yards down the field, and he just didn't throw the ball to them. And Dustin, here's the thing that frightens me. Florida at 4-2 right now. Mertz hasn't cost them a game yet. Mertz's limitations as a QB has not cost Florida a game yet. They lost to Utah, and we're not angry about it, obviously. It happened a while ago. We've seen a lot of things transpire since then, but just in the name of just being transparent, Florida lost that game because of just sheer stupidity against Utah. And they lost to Kentucky because the entire team just melted down and Kentucky wanted the game more than we did. Mertz's limitations as a thrower of the football has not cost Florida a game yet. It's going to against LSU, against Georgia, against FSU, maybe even Missouri. If we get into a track meet type of game where our defense is having trouble because the opposing offense can really move the ball down the field and we need to match them strike for strike, tit for tat, eye for eye, and Mertz is limited to throwing the ball just a couple of yards beyond the line of scrimmage, we're in trouble. So that's what has me really concerned as we step into the part of the schedule that's by far the more difficult half of the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And I argue that in the Kentucky game, I thought we could have made that a better game if we would have hit that first deep shot down the field. So I think Mertz would certainly like to have that one back. There was a couple other key plays, but you're right. That game wasn't on him. There was a lot of things that happened that was outside of his control specifically, but he could cost us, like you're saying. So definitely want to see him get better in those things. Now defensively, I want to hear your thoughts on the defense, Neil. I know that certainly we took a step back against Kentucky, and Vanderbilt is not Kentucky, right? But also Kentucky had a hard time with Georgia. So, we got to understand our place right now, unfortunately. But defensively,
they got slaughtered by Georgia.
Exactly.
They lost 51-13, and
Yeah.
that's a Georgia team we're going to be going up against ourselves in a couple of weeks. So when anyone might want to comment, if you're watching on YouTube or on Spotify or wherever, or you want to tweet us and say, "Well, you guys are negative Nancy's. You're complaining about a 24-point win against another SEC team." Yeah, well, the very last time we stepped onto the field against an SEC team, we got slaughtered by a team that couldn't even compete with Georgia. And that's going to be our competition, not just this year, but moving forward. The goal of Florida is to win championships, or at least compete for them. And Georgia is the kind of team you're going to have to beat in order to do that. So just forewarning, we're not going to be too pleased about this win against Vanderbilt just because we don't know anything different than the last time we saw them against Kentucky. This didn't prove anything to me. I don't know if we've gotten better. We looked better, but I don't know if this team is actually more gap sound. Want to talk defense, Dustin? Shamar James looked great. Of course he did. He should have. It's Vanderbilt. And I'm a huge fan of Shamar James. I'm a big fan of what he does for the Gators on defense. He is everywhere making plays for us, but he didn't prove anything against Vanderbilt. Same with Scooby Williams. I like the guy. I think he's a very good football player. He didn't prove anything to me against Vanderbilt. So I don't know what to make of it, Dustin. And I guess we can talk defense in more detail now. There were a few big plays we gave up. Obviously, those are not good. I think Jakeem Jackson learned a little bit from getting beat there. Jason Marshall, I don't even know what to make of that. He did get his face mask pulled on the one hand. On the other hand, the lack of hustle to at least attempt to make a play there was, to me, appalling. But forget those deep pass plays. What else stuck out to you against Vandy on defense for the Gators?
Yeah, I thought that the front seven did a pretty excellent job. I know that, I really don't want to get into it, but there was a lot of no calls in the holding department that was frustrating. But you know, I'll leave it at this. Being a Gator, you kind of expect that to happen. It's almost the norm. But for all that, I thought the front seven did an excellent job. In terms of the secondary, there was some things that were pretty disappointing. I thought Jaden Hill had an excellent. I thought he had an excellent game. Four tackles, two solo. He made one hit that was outstanding that prevented Vanderbilt from continuing a drive early in the game when they seemed to have just a tiny bit of momentum before the Gators really had put it away. So that was exceptional. But for the most part, I want to see us have a better outing. I mean, a player that we really haven't seen a lot from is Jordan Castile. After having all SEC freshman type numbers to start the season, the last two games he's sort of been hiding on the stat sheet, for lack of a better phrase. And he's somebody that we had high expectation for going into the last two games. In fact, going into the Kentucky game, he's the player that I had put down. I want to see him. Of all the players on defense, I want to see him step up. Because if not even Castile can step up, then I'm gonna have trouble believing in what this defense is gonna put together. And lo and behold, he has not played up to his potential. Now, is the reason for that is our opposing offense is getting on him and not throwing his direction? Sure, but he's a safety. He's not a corner. There's certain things that you can do with an opposing game breaking corner that you can't do with a safety, because the safety's in the middle of the field, right? He's not just there to prevent passes. There's a whole dynamic on the defensive side. Um, but yeah, man, I'm excited to see what this defense looks like against South Carolina, because we'll get into it in the pregame pod for that game. But I'll just say this: South Carolina, they have a decent offense. They're not Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's not good offensively. They're not good.
That's putting
You
it mildly.
we Neil, we have a power ranking that we've put together, and it's been pretty successful. And so I think that there's enough that power ranking has proven even thus far during the season for me to tell you that when I have Vanderbilt power ranked amongst one of the worst teams in college football, right? I, I'm not just talking the SEC, right? The 13 of the 14 teams in the SEC are power ranked better than the average college football team. That means that 13 of the 14 teams in the SEC would be expected on a neutral field to beat the average college football team by at least 4 points, Neil. Vanderbilt, they're not even close.
So
They will be on a
give
neutral.
us all a reference point. Which team in college football would you say is the average college football team?
All right, let me pull it up.
Gotta give your model a shout out. And just for the time being, y'all should know that if you're not familiar with Vanderbilt, that they barely beat Hawaii, who is one of the worst teams in the FBS. They lost by 2 scores to Wake Forest. They lost to UNLV. And they lost to Kentucky and Missouri by 3 scores each. So Florida beating them by 24 doesn't really prove anything.
All right.
All right, go ahead. Let's see what
All
you
right.
got.
All right, for reference, and this may be a little controversial, but the right now the average college football team is Either Troy or Colorado. Now Colorado, they're solid. But they're solid, but they haven't played Georgia, right? Colorado would get
They're right.
creamed
They're
by
in the
Georgia.
Pac-12.
They got creamed by Oregon. But Colorado and Troy are right now right on that cusp. If you've ever seen a power ranking like FPI, S&P Plus, if you've seen ours, really what it's doing is that index or that rating that you have is how much points you'd be expected to beat the average college football team. So if you have a index of 0, it means you're the average team. You're the comparison that everybody else is compared against.
Right. You're
So it's
neutral.
just a easy strategy on picking games if you want to get into sports betting and such.
And that sounds
Um,
right. It sounds right that Troy would be expected to lose to 13 of the 14 SEC teams, but they'd be expected to beat Vanderbilt. That sounds reasonable. Colorado, I wonder how they do against that Will Rogers offense in Mississippi State. That'd be interesting to me. But I feel like they should be underdogs against certainly 11 SEC teams. I don't know about Arkansas or Mississippi State. And Vanderbilt, they're probably expected to beat. But that's just, again, we got to set the context, us, and that's your favorite word going back to when we first started this pod, when it was just you and I back in the COVID swamp of 2020. Context, 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 context. Who did you play? How did you look against them? How have they looked against other competition? How has that other competition looked against their competition? And so on and so on and so forth. And it gets into a 6 degrees of separation exercise at the very end. But the bottom line is that Florida played a team that is not representative of what they're going to be seeing the rest of the season. So Florida
right.
felt pretty badly after that Kentucky game. They got beaten up. They got punched in the face. They got black eyes, bloody noses, fat lips, whatever. They are beaten up and bruised after that game. And they have the mindset that we have to go out and we have to avenge that loss and prove that it wasn't us that stepped on that field in Lexington, Kentucky. This didn't do it. This win did not do it simply because there was nothing they could have done in this game that would have proven anything else, because this was a bad Vanderbilt team. So before we say that phrase so many times that people get tired of listening to it, Dustin, one thing I wanted to point out with our defense that I just got through saying didn't prove anything because the competition was so bad. But again, Shamar James, I liked what I saw from him on film. He was everywhere again. Doesn't really show me that he's ready to take on Georgia or LSU, but I liked what I saw from him in terms of the way he just made plays across all 53 and a half yards of width of the football field. He was everywhere. He was flying to the ball. He looked very gap sound on the first film run through. I didn't go through it a second time as I usually do before these pods, but on the first run through, he looked really, really good. He looked really, really sound there. Jakeem Jackson, by the way, got to shout him out. He got burned on the deep ball. And then 3 plays later, he breaks up the pass on 4th and goal to, completely shut down the Vanderbilt hope, whatever was left of it at that point, to more or less, it was only 14-7 at that point, but you could just feel that was a big turning point in that game because Vanderbilt was trying to tie it. They were going to say, okay, here we go, 14-14. It's not just one score. It wasn't just the one bomb that gives us 7 points. No, we've proven we can score multiple times on this team. We're in a game. No. Jakeem Jackson shuts that down. And even at 14-7, it just felt like the wind was taken out of their sails. So good for him for rebounding from that not great play a few moments before that to bounce back and get that stop. So Dustin, let's talk stock up and stock down, one of our newer segments of the pod this
Yes.
year. Give me someone who you think stock is up and someone who you think stock is down after the Vandy game.
Yeah, that's a great question, Neil. I think the stock is up with Billy Napier. In my mind, I know that the stock has been trending down, but for him, it's trending up. And why do I say that? I think that he's at least listening to him in the post game. I think he's got an edge about him. He's definitely not the super chill Billy Napier that we saw to start the season. He's definitely got an edge about him, and I thought that what he showed on the field on Saturday against Vanderbilt, I thought it showed progress and growth. Now, do I think we still need an offensive coordinator? Yes. Why? Because ultimately, an offensive coordinator is going to allow Billy Napier to be the best and most successful version of himself. People say it like he's gonna need to fire himself. That's not true. By hiring an offensive coordinator, he's actually going to put more money in his pocket. He's going to allow him to be more successful. It's going to allow him to win more games if he can put an absolute baller calling the plays so he can be the best version of himself. So I think for him, the stock is up. Now, as far as the stock being down, I hate to call him out, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna say Jason Marshall. He's a guy that came in, 5-star athlete, guy I mean, you remember Neil. You remember how pumped I was that he became a Gator. You remember how excited I was about his eval that
Him and Corey Collier, the Palmetto boys, we were so stoked at that.
exactly. We were jacked up, but he's definitely not playing to his bill. We have, and look, stars do matter, and I'm not going to lose any sleep over that argument. Stars do matter. The teams that get the most 4 and 5 stars are the teams that are having the most success, especially in the SEC. Look at Georgia. Okay, they have been either the best recruiting program or one of the best recruiting programs in the country. And look at them. There's a reason why they beat Kentucky by about 30 and we lost to Kentucky by about 20, right? So there's a reason for that. Jason Marshall not playing to his 5-star build, and for that reason, stock down. What say you, Neil?
Got to agree with you on Marshall. I mean, look, Marshall was definitely the victim of some OPI. Absolutely, the receiver got away with a blatant face mask there that was not called. Could not agree more. People were calling me out on Twitter when I posted that initially, and I said, look, I agree with you wholeheartedly. There was pass interference on the grasping of the face mask and then twisting it like that should have been called. It was not. Totally on board. That still doesn't explain the complete lack of care he has to not even attempt to give chase on that play. Like, those are two separate issues to me. You got interfered with. Don't just sulk and act like the play is over. Go try to chase him down. If you don't win the battle, so be it. But you can't just like sit there and complain about it, because Dustin, I'm the one with the thread, right? Everyone at this point knows that I have that long thread going of all the times the NCAA officials have screwed Florida over. And it goes in all sports. It's not just football. It's softball, it's volleyball, it's basketball, it's baseball. There's a lacrosse one in there. That's what they do. They're going to screw us over. You know it's going to happen. So don't complain when it does. Play with the knowledge that it's going to happen in your head and do something about it. Go try to chase the guy down. It was the lack of effort there that really stuck with me. But so yeah, I'll agree with you there. And I think stock up. You got to go Treyon Webb, because he is a guy that wasn't supposed to play this year. We had Trevor Etienne, we had Montrell Johnson, we had Cam Carroll coming in from Tulane. We thought, all right, that's our three. That's our three-headed monster. We don't need a fourth. That's going to be the three-headed monster we go with this year. Then Carroll gets hurt. Then Etienne has some dings that bruise him up, and he doesn't go in this game. So now all of a sudden, Treyon Webb is RB2, and he takes full advantage of it with 4 carries for 70 yards. Big day. Almost broke a touchdown run, as we said earlier. So great for him. Very, very happy for him. There were some Gator people out there who were saying they weren't that high on him. Well, we just had to take a running back to take a running back. We didn't really go after a top running back in last year's class. He's just a filler, and he could recruit. So we just said, we'll take him. No, he's a Florida Gator football player. He's not just a kid that can recruit for the Gators on the trail. So very happy to see that for him. And hopefully this is just the start of great things to come for him, especially as Trevor Etienne and Montrell Johnson one day will no longer be with the program as they go to the pros. So good for him there. I think it's time to wrap up the show with our grades. And these are going to be very interesting. So I'll let you go first, Dustin. Offense, defense, special teams coaches. What have you got?
Well, Neil, I thought we played pretty well. We won the game, which is the most important thing, and we did it in a way that was to the expectation. Neil, we didn't exceed the expectation. If anybody had the chance to see the scores that we put together or heard the pregame pod for the game, Florida basically did what we expected. Major shout out to Chris, who nearly nailed his projection. I believe he said 37-14. So, Florida winning 38-14, pretty much right on the nose. The model had Florida winning 37-9, and I did not give Florida enough credit. I changed I asserted my mind in my pregame prediction and said 28-13. So I did not give the offense enough credit. And for that reason, I got to give the offense around an A. So I'm going to give them an A minus. There's still things that we got to see. There's things that if they do, no pun intended, but if they do these things against other better opponents, and I say other better opponents because literally every team on Florida's schedule is better than Vanderbilt for the rest of the season. It's not going to fly. No pun intended. And for that reason, I'm giving the offense an A minus. Defense, I thought the defense played well. There's certain things you can't do against a team like Vanderbilt. We gave up too many explosive plays. We let them in it in a lot of parts of the game. They had well over 200 yards. Um, let me get that number perfect. I got the box score in front of me. Um, Vanderbilt had 340 yards and 276 through the air. So for that reason, I can't give the defense anything higher than a B. So I'm going to give them a B plus. Special teams, A minus. Special teams didn't really cost Florida. We made our field goals. Coaching, B plus. Thought the coaching was pretty good. There's still things that I want to see the Gators do better. Um, Overall, if you do the math, I think that puts Florida around a 90%. Hopefully, hopefully down the line, hopefully we can give the Gators an overall A grade for some of the games we have coming up because it's going to be a lot harder to do that. Anyway, Neil, what are your thoughts? I look forward to hearing your grades.
Well, as you first said, I think in 2020 when we blew out South Carolina, or when we were blowing them out and then we let them back into the game, or maybe it was for Vandy in 20. Anyway, it was in 2020 when we first started the pod that you said I have to give grades based on not only how Florida does, but based on how they do against the competition that they face. Context, context, context. As we talked about, Vanderbilt is a bad football team. So 340 yards that they pick up. I mean, if you hold Georgia or LSU or hell, even Missouri to 340 yards, you'd get a much better grade than you're going to get against Vandy, because Vanderbilt is a school that does not recruit the same caliber of athlete as Florida. That's going to get them a C minus grade because those pass plays were big. They did happen. There were three of them, and not just one. You can't just say, well, it was just an anomaly. Jason Marshall just, whatever, one bad play. It wasn't just the Jakeem Jackson beating, or it wasn't just Jakeem Jackson who had gotten beaten on the deep ball. And then there was also the Richie Hoskins touchdown that he's just wide open, completely uncovered. So that's three. That's a pattern. And Vanderbilt putting up 340 yards on this defense is a step back from what we've come to expect under Austin Armstrong. So this is maybe partly me just holding them to a higher standard because I expect more of them, but they're going to get a C minus for that, even though I thought for the majority of the game they did their job. And anyway, C minus is a passing grade. It's not great, but it's passable. You don't fail. So they'll get a C minus for me. Offense is going to get a B, coming up just shy of 500 yards of offense. They finished with 495. Graham Mertz, I mean, you would have liked to have seen him throw some deep balls, but again, we just have to make peace with it. We don't have that ability this year. We just have to accept that. So, he did fine. No turnovers. Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. Shout the defense out for that, too. Forced the fumble. And maybe, you know what? Dustin, for the first time, I'm going to amend my grade. I'll give them a C, not a C minus, because they did recover a fumble and because they did get that goal line stand. And
Come on, C plus,
when the
C
game
plus.
no, because there's still 340 yards that they put up with a much, much, much lesser caliber of athlete on their sidelines. So they'll get a C because they did come up clutch with that goal line stand and that fumble recovery. But Offense is going to get a B because, again, I thought they did what they were supposed to do. They didn't do anything tremendous, but they were perfectly fine. No complaints. B. Special teams, for the first time this year, Dustin, the first time in 6 games, no catastrophic mistakes by the special teams. I wouldn't say that they were spectacular, but I mean, I still don't like the idea of us catching punts inside our own 10-yard line. We did that a couple times,
Yeah.
but I'll give them a B also, because they were, again, they fine, no major issues with them, and I think B is going to be kind of my neutral grade where there's nothing tremendous and nothing terrible. So I'll give them a B. And coaching, see, this one's hard to gauge because, I mean, Napier could have done whatever the hell he wanted and it would have worked because Vanderbilt is just so beneath Florida in terms of pure talent. But I'll give Napier a B minus because, again, I don't like these play calls. There's a 1st and 25 and you call 3 plays, none of which have the ball getting thrown more than 6 or 7 yards down the field. It's just incomprehensible to me. But maybe some
Yeah.
of that is Murch's limitation with a deep ball. Maybe some of that is I don't know, the fear of the offensive line minus Austin Barber being able to block long enough for the receivers to run their routes. I don't know what it is because I'm not in those rooms, but that's just, gotta get an OC next year, as we talked about. And with that
Yes.
said, Dustin, I think that's about it for this show. Before we do wrap up, though, I do want to very quickly shout out your model, which is batting over 80% on the year. So I think it's like 58% against the spread, but 81% overall, which in both cases, fantastic. 58% against the spread is good enough to earn you money. Like, you can live in Vegas and make money as a professional bettor if you go more than 55%. So 58% against the spread is pretty great. Got to shout that out as well. We'll talk more about that as the week goes on. We'll also have Chris Phillips of the Spurs Up Show on a show this upcoming week as our Chris Yanes returns. Dustin, as always, great to hear your insight and have you talk about your Florida Gators. Until next time, y'all, this has been Neil Schulman with the In All Kinds of Weather forecast. Go Gators, and let's get a win in Columbia. I will be there. Hopefully the Gators make that trip worthwhile.